Hi everyone. Okay, so my topic is on obesity, and for my major claim, I'll be talking about how labeling obesity as a disease will positively change the perception people have on the condition. From the novel Vision for a Healthy and Fit Nation, according to General David Satcher, obesity poses a major public health challenge. Each year, obesity contributes to an estimated 112,000 preventable deaths. In my speech, I will be covering three main points. First, calling obesity a disease will make the public and medical community look at this condition in a more serious light. Second, by calling obesity a disease, it will reduce the negative stigma most people have on it. And lastly, I will be talking about the medical perspectives and why they believe it to be a disease. So by calling obesity a disease, it will not only make more people pay attention, but it will induce physicians to make the problem more serious and make changes to the way the medical community takes on the issue. It is important that the medical community, as well as the public and insurers, drop their stereotypic perceptions of those who are obese and put the obese condition on the same level as other diseases. By calling obesity a disease, it provides a clear warning of the significant health risks and will also spark the attention towards funding and research aimed at finding medical fixes. Labeling this a disease can also help the repayment for obesity drugs, surgery, and counseling. According to Morgan Downey, an advocate for obese people and publisher of the online Downey Obesity Report, she states that companies marketing the product will be able to take this to physicians and point to and say, look, the mothership has now recognized obesity as a disease. You will see physicians taking obesity more seriously because they have started to counsel their patients about it. And healthcare providers will be reimbursed for their time spent counseling patients on proper nutrition, exercise, and a healthy lifestyle habit. Next, if we label this a disease, it will reduce the negative stigma most people have on it. Most people think that obesity stems from simply eating too much and exercising too little. However, that may not be the case. Doctors have stated that people do not have full control over their weight. Even after weight has been lost, there are still hormonal and metabolic abnormalities not reversible by lifestyle interventions. From an article by Leslie Horn, she writes that doctors have found that the body has natural killer T cells that help fight obesity and can prevent metabolic syndrome, which in some cases leads to diabetes and heart disease. However, they also discovered that people who have lower levels of these immunities, meaning your body will shield you from packing on the pounds, but once you cross a certain threshold, it pretty much just says screw it. According to the article on obesity pro-con, people who are obese have excess fat tissue that causes the overproduction of leptin, which is a molecule that regulates food intake and energy output, as well as other food intake and energy mediators in the body, which then leads to an abnormal regulation of food intake. May 2014, a study published in the Journal of Molecular Psychology linked higher rates of obesity to the Fat, Mass, and Obesity Association. The FTO gene reportedly lowers activity in part of the brain that controls impulses and the response to the taste and texture of food. So people with this gene are more likely to eat more fatty foods and eat more impulsively as they age. Lastly, there are many medical perspectives that consider obesity to be a disease. Obesity has been called a disease in many public forums, including mass media news pieces, pharmaceutical company press releases, educational materials for health professionals, and the general public, and editorials and articles in scholarly journals. Government entities and major medical groups have also recognized obesity as a disease. We have the Food and Drug Administration, the American Heart Association, the American College of Cardiology, the Obesity Society, and the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. Even the IRS recognizes obesity as a disease, so weight loss expenses can be counted as medical deduction from taxes. On June 18, 2013, the American Medical Association recognized obesity as a disease requiring a range of medical interventions to advance obesity treatment and preventions. According to Mosby's Dictionary of Medicine, Nursing, and Health Professions, a disease is 1, a condition of abnormal vital function involving any structure, part, or system of an organism, and 2, a specific illness or disorder characterized by a recognizable set of signs and symptoms attributable to heredity, infection, diet, or environment. And obesity fits this description. So all in all, I have talked about how this will make people look at this issue in a more serious light, how it would reduce the negative stigma and all the medical perspectives that consider obesity to be a disease.
All right, Allison, the proposition is pretty clearly stated. There's a little bit of controversial information in the background as you set it up. I do think at the beginning, though, you start off with a question, and then it makes the proposition sound like a question at first. You do finally get to a more clear statement of the proposition, and I thought that that would have been the better way to begin. The secondary claims were previewed, although they're not all listed as claims either. Some of them are expository kinds of information as opposed to declarative statements, especially the third point. When you get to the body of the speech, the first point is labeled pretty clearly. There's a lot of information here that talks about, well, I shouldn't say information, there's a lot of discussion here about that talks about how people who are obese are perceived or they're viewed differently. There's a suggestion that doctors may not have taken it seriously, although I think you need some data on this to suggest that this has really been an issue. The notion that doctors didn't see obesity as an issue to be dealt with as their responsibility seems to me to be counterintuitive. Now, if there's a reason to believe that that's true, and then therefore the designation of it as a disease is going to change that attitude, then there ought to be some grounds to show that that was the case at one point. The same sort of thing with the negative stigma. I think most people recognize that there is a negative stigma for people being identified as obese, but I'm not sure that that negative stigma does much to affect people's actions and behaviors. We get a lot of discussion about all of the reasons why people might have difficulty losing weight or why obesity continues to act. My guess is that some of the responses on this issue will have less to do with they're going to be arguing alternate causality, that the sources of obesity are not these brain chemicals that you're talking about or genetic predispositions, but instead it's they're eating fruit that is apparently not the same as it was 5,000 years ago, or they're eating low-fat foods instead of fat foods, that kind of thing. Or, we've just changed our lifestyles a whole heck of a lot, and we've become lazy sons of guns, that kind of thing. So, and the notion that changing the definition is going to change any of that, I think that's a little bit problematic. Here's the other thing, and that is that once it's designated as a disease, is there any reason to believe that that's going to produce a beneficial outcome? You say it is, but I don't see much reason to believe that, except that maybe insurance companies will now be obligated to pay for certain kinds of treatments. If they're not obligated to pay for those things now, you should show that. If they are paying for those things now, or let's say that they're paying for some of those things now, has it made any difference? We could use some information like that to show those kinds of things. So I think you explained the concept of the argument pretty effectively, but in making the claim that it's actually going to make a difference, I think you need some more information. A lot of reading in your presentation, and I think that's mostly because you've got all of that complicated explanation that you're going through. All right, thank you.